the world has a quiet way of telling you where you belong. For me, Eliza Vance, that place was always in the shadow of my older sister. I turned 32 last spring, and for most of those years, my position in the family hierarchy was as fixed as a star in the night sky. 3 years my senior, my sister Chloe was the sun around which my parents, Laura and Richard, orbited. She was the golden child, the one who effortlessly collected the smiles, the praise, the second helpings at dinner, and the bigger bedroom with the better view. Chloe did everything right, or at least everything that mattered in their eyes. She was married at 24, a mother of 2 boys by 27. She baked casseroles from scratch and, in a feat of bewildering organization, sent out perfectly curated Christmas cards in September. And me, I remained single, channeling my energy into a career that I was proud of. I rented a quiet apartment across town, a sanctuary where no one asked why I still hadn't found a man to settle down with. I had a 401k, a Roth IRA, and a fierce determination to never ask anyone for help. But in my family's ledger, those assets meant nothing without a ring on my finger. My parents never said it outright, of course. Their disapproval was a thing of subtle weight woven into their questions. Don't you want children before it's too late, honey? Your sister's boys are growing so fast, it's a shame they don't have cousins. You're still in that little apartment, huh? I learned to master the art of the nod and the quick change of subject. For years, I nurtured a faint hope that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, they would finally see me with the same pride they reserved for Chloe. But that hope faded slowly. Like dust settling on shelves you've stopped noticing. I wasn't the daughter they bragged about. I was the one they assumed would be fine no matter what, so I kept my distance. It felt safer that way. I fulfilled my duties, showing up for holidays, fixing their Wi-Fi, bringing wine when they forgot birthdays, including my own. I never complained. I didn't know then that distance was a flimsy shield, that one day they would try to pull me back in so tightly I'd barely recognize the person they wanted me to be. Chloe's picture-perfect life began to fracture. The way fine china does, a quiet crack at first, then a sudden catastrophic shatter. Her husband, Mark, had been cheating. For years. She found the messages by accident. Or perhaps she was simply ready to stop pretending she couldn't see what was right in front of her. When she filed for divorce, everyone rallied around her. Even our parents, who saw her as a victim of circumstance, never a flawed judge of character. Mark vanished soon after, leaving behind no child support, no apology. Gone. Chloe was left with her 2 boys, Leo and Max, and a mountain of bills she couldn't possibly manage alone. Our parents offered words of support, but their savings were untouchable, tied up in retirement and sentiment. Chloe moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment where the wallpaper peeled in the corners and the boys had to share a room. I didn't think twice. I paid her attorney's retainer. I covered 6 months of her rent when her part-time job at the community center couldn't stretch far enough. I watched the kids on weekends so she could have a moment to breathe. I never held it over her, never. Expected a thank you. I loved my nephews, and seeing Chloe, for all her past glory, look so utterly broken stirred a deep, uncomplicated empathy in me. She wasn't used to asking for help, and she hated needing it. I thought foolishly that maybe now things would change. That my parents would see my stability and my quiet generosity as a strength. They didn't. Every phone call with my mother began with a detailed report on Chloe's pain, immediately followed by a pointed question about whether I was seeing anyone yet. I learned to stay quiet, to help where I could, telling myself that this is what family meant, showing up even when you're tired of being invisible. But here's the thing about always being the responsible one. Eventually, people stop seeing your help as a gift. They start treating it as a given. It was a Wednesday when my mother called, her voice effervescent with a brightness I hadn't heard in years. "Eliza, honey, we have such good news. Can you come by tonight?" For a hopeful second, I imagined Mark had resurfaced with a fat check, that the courts had finally tracked him down. Is it about the child support? I asked. No, no, even better, she chirped. Just come over. Your father's already home and Chloe will be here too. There was something off about her tone, too smooth, too rehearsed. I pushed the feeling aside, telling myself not to overthink it. Maybe just this once, it really was good news. When I walked into their living room, the scene felt staged. My father, Richard, was in his recliner. My mother, Laura, perched on the edge of the couch, with Chloe beside her, offering a nervous, fragile smile. On the coffee table between them sat a thick manila folder. There she is, Dad said, standing to give me a perfunctory hug before immediately handing me the folder. Take a look. I opened it. Inside was a heavy stack of documents, dense with legal language and real estate logos. At the top, in bold letters, were the words, mortgage agreement. What is this? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. It's for Chloe's new house. Mom beamed, her eyes shining. We used most of our savings and some of the retirement for the down payment. Isn't it wonderful? I blinked, trying to process. You bought a house? Yes, she said. A lovely place, 3 bedrooms, a big yard for the boys. They need stability, Eliza. This apartment just isn't enough. I looked at Chloe, who gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, her gaze fixed on her hands. That's great, I said, honestly. The boys will love that. I started to hand the folder back. Kono? No, those are for you, Mom said, pushing it firmly back toward me. The air in the room seemed too thin. The hum of the refrigerator suddenly roaring in my ears. What do you mean? For me? Dad cleared his throat, taking on his serious, authoritative tone. We've talked about this as a family, and we've decided you'll take over the mortgage. You've been saving for years. You can make the payments easily. Chloe can't afford it, Mom added gently, as if explaining a simple, unchangeable fact of nature. She's doing everything she can, but the boys need this. The room went silent. I felt their collective gaze on me, a physical weight. You're asking me to pay for Chloe's house? My voice was quiet, trembling with disbelief. Chloe still wouldn't meet my eyes. After Mark left, I have nothing, she murmured. I can't give them what they need without help. I looked down at the mortgage document again. The total amount was staggering, a sum that would consume my entire life savings and then some. I already paid for her divorce. I said the words, barely a whisper, and half a year of her rent. Sweetheart, Mom said, reaching for my hand, her touch feeling like a trap. We raised you. We've done so much for you. Isn't it time you gave back to the family? That was it. The snap. I stood up, my heart pounding a furious rhythm against my ribs. You bought a house you knew she couldn't afford because you assumed I would pay for it. Dad didn't even try to deny it. His face hardened. You don't have a husband or children, Eliza? He said flatly. What else are you saving for? I'm not doing this, I said, my voice finally finding its strength. This isn't help. This is manipulation. I left the folder on the table unopened and walked out the front door before the screams I was holding back could tear their way out. I thought they would cool down, that they'd eventually realize the sheer absurdity of their demand. I was wrong. The shaming campaign began that Saturday. The first call was from my cousin Megan, someone I hadn't seen since our grandfather's funeral. There was no hello, no preamble. Your mother told me what happened. I can't believe you're being so cold. Excuse me, I stammered, gripping the kitchen counter. Chloe's a single mom, Eliza. Those boys are your nephews. You're sitting on all that money and you won't help your own family? Megan, you don't know the full story. I know enough, she snapped. Family helps family. Chloe would do the same for you. A bitter, involuntary laugh escaped me. No, I said quietly, she wouldn't. You're unbelievable, she spat and hung up. After that, the floodgates opened. Texts and voicemails from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Uncle Don, a cousin named Jessica. The messages blurred into a single condemning chorus. You're selfish. They raised you. She has children. You don't. What struck me most wasn't the anger, but the absolute certainty behind it. It was as if my single, child-free status was a moral failing that automatically obligated me to finance my sister's life. The worst came from my Aunt Carol, my mom's older sister. She called during dinner, her voice coated in that sugary tone. She perfected for delivering insults as advice. "I just want to talk some sense into you, dear," she began. "You're not getting any younger, Elisa. Who knows if you'll ever have children of your own? At least this way, you'd be contributing to your family's future." The implication was breathtakingly cruel. "So, because I'm single?" I said, my voice dangerously level. "I owe my sister a house." "Oh, don't be so dramatic. They need help, and you, well, you're in a position to give it." That night, I did something I never thought I would. One by one, I blocked every number that had chimed in. My phone fell silent. If they couldn't respect my boundaries, they didn't deserve my peace. And deep down, a painful truth solidified. This was never about the house. It was a punishment for the life I had chosen. 2 months of blessed silence passed. I poured myself into my work, took long walks in the mornings, and let the quiet become a comforting friend. Then, on a Thursday, the envelope arrived. It was thick, heavy, and official-looking. I assumed it was insurance paperwork. When I tore it open, my stomach plummeted. They were suing me. Laura and Richard Vance, my own parents, had filed a formal civil claim. They were demanding $350,000 in reimbursement for expenses related to my upbringing. I read it 3 times, each pass making the words colder and sharper. They had itemized everything: food, clothing, education. They included a section grotesquely titled Emotional Support During Adolescence, and even tried to tally the cost of family vacations from when I was 6. The final line left no room for interpretation. Funds to be used to complete the mortgage on the property purchased for Chloe Vance and her minor children. They weren't even pretending it was about principle. I found the best lawyer my money could buy. Eleanor Croft was a sharp, nonsense woman who wore sleek glasses and spoke as if she'd seen far worse than a family implosion. She listened to my entire story without blinking once. "They have no legal standing," she said flatly, flipping through the claim. "Parents are obligated to provide for their minor children. There's no legal expectation of repayment. So why?" I asked, feeling numb. Eleanor shrugged. "It's a pressure tactic. I think you'll fold to avoid the humiliation of court." "Or," she added, looking at me over her glasses, "they genuinely believe you owe them." Over the next 3 weeks, I gathered my own evidence. It was a painful archaeological dig into my own generosity. The $7,200 I'd paid for Chloe's rent. The $5,500 check to her divorce attorney. Bank transfers to my parents over the years, $500 here. $1,000 therewith, texts from my mother attached, asking for just a little help when Dad's pension fell short. Every receipt was a paper cut, a memory I hadn't asked to revisit. On the day of the court hearing, the courtroom felt colder than it should have in the middle of summer. The walls were a sterile beige, the chairs a hard, unforgiving plastic. On the left side of the aisle sat my parents with Chloe between them. Behind them sat a gallery of my accuser's aunt's uncles, cousins who hadn't sent me a birthday card in a decade, now present as a unified front of family solidarity. On my side, there are only 2 people, my maternal grandparents, Nora and Tom. Grandma Nora, wearing a brooch I remembered from my childhood, leaned over and squeezed my hand. "What they're doing isn't right," she whispered. "But you already know that." The judge entered, a man in his 60s with graying temples and a gaze that suggested he'd heard every lie humanity had to offer. My father stood first. "Your Honor," he began, his voice practiced and reasonable. "We're not unreasonable people. We invested our lives, our money, our everything into raising Eliza. We are simply asking for a portion of that investment back to help our other daughter and her children." The judge didn't blink. "Specifically," he said, flipping a page, "what did you spend on her education after she turned 18? My parents exchanged a nervous glance. Dad cleared his throat. "Well, at that time, Chloe had just gotten married. We were helping her and her husband get established." "So," the judge clarified, his tone neutral, "you did not contribute to the defendant's college expenses." "No," Mom said quickly. "But my mother, Eliza's grandmother, did. And since she's my mother, I'd argue we supported her indirectly." From behind me, I heard Grandma Nora let out the faintest scoff. Eleanor rose, calm and methodical. "Your Honor, we have documentation showing that Ms. Vance has been financially independent since the age of 18. Furthermore, she has provided repeated substantial financial support to both her parents and her sister." She handed over the file, the bank transfers, the receipts, the emails. "This includes $7,200 in rent payments for her sister, $5,500 to her divorce attorney, and multiple direct deposits to her parents during times they reported financial hardship." The judge reviewed the file, his expression unreadable. "So, the defendant wasn't receiving support, but giving it, correct?" Eleanor said. My mother shifted in her seat. "That money isn't relevant. We're talking about the cost of raising her, the food, the shelter, the emotional guidance." "And why exactly?" the judge asked, his voice cutting through her theatrics. "Do you need $350,000 now?" Mom hesitated, her eyes flickering toward Chloe. "To help Chloe pay off the mortgage," she said softly. A thick silence fell over the courtroom. The judge turned to my sister. "Ms. Vance," he said, "do you believe your sister should be held financially responsible for your home loan?" Chloe finally looked up, her voice small. "She's not married. She doesn't have children. I do. And that creates a financial obligation." The judge pressed. "We're family," she pleaded. The judge raised an eyebrow. "I'm not married either. Does that mean I should pay for my clerk's rent or my bailiff's children's tuition?" Chloe blinked, speechless. The judge turned his attention back to my parents. For the next hour, he dismantled their case with cold, unflinching questions. Why? Did they assume I would pay? Why purchase a home they knew Chloe couldn't afford? Why did they tie help to guilt and guilt to a non-existent debt? Their answers collapsed under the weight of their own entitlement. When we stepped outside into the sunlight, I wasn't sure if I'd won. But for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't the one on trial. The verdict came a week later. The judge didn't waste a single word. After reviewing the evidence, found the plaintiff's claim to be entirely without merit. Mr. and Mrs. Vance. The financial responsibility of raising a child does not entitle you to reimbursement once that child becomes an adult. He glanced at his notes. In fact, the evidence strongly suggests Ms. Eliza Vance has already provided significant and unreciprocated financial support to both of you and her sister. He looked directly at them, his expression stern. Frankly, I find your behavior toward your daughter to be both brazen and deeply disappointing. Case dismissed. I didn't celebrate. I just stood there, breathing, as Eleanor smiled and Grandma Nora squeezed my arm. Grandpa Tom whispered, "You're free." But the entitlement was a deep-rooted weed. A week later, Grandma called. "Your mother came by yesterday," she said, her voice tired. "She asked us to release her inheritance early. To pay for Chloe's mortgage, of course." My grandparents refused. Months passed. I bought a small house. Nothing grand, but it was mine. I painted the kitchen a cheerful yellow, planted tomatoes in the backyard, and adopted a solemn gray cat named Jasper, who slept on my laptop. Life became quiet. I heard through my grandmother that Chloe had rented out the house my parents bought and moved back in with them. Then, nearly a year after the trial, an email landed in my inbox. No subject line, We heard you bought a house. Since you now have extra space, we think it would be best if Chloe and the boys moved in with you. It would be much more convenient for them there. Let us know when they can move in. Love, Mom and Dad. I read it twice, not with anger, but with a strange sense of finality. I replied simply, I will not be hosting Chloe or the boys. If you contact me again with these kinds of demands, I will report the harassment to the police. Do not contact me again. Then I hit send, blocked their email address, and went to make myself a cup of tea. These days, my house smells like fresh basil and coffee. Jasper sits on the windowsill, watching birds he'll never chase. My grandparents visit often, bringing pie and quiet company. One Sunday, on the porch swing, Grandma told me that my Aunt Carol had finally told my mother to stop bringing me up at family gatherings. That no one wanted to hear it anymore. That part made me smile. I'm dating someone now. His name is Daniel, and he has a kind laugh that feels like space being made just for me. He hasn't asked about my family. Not really, and I haven't offered. I know my parents and sister still believe I failed some unspoken test of loyalty, but I sleep better now. Sometimes I feel an ache for the family I wish I'd had, for a love. That didn't come with fine print. But I don't regret saying no. Not anymore. Because peace, I've learned, isn't something you're given. It's the house you build for yourself, brick by painful brick.